My name is Maya Lin, and for the past 3 years, I've poured my soul into Viridian Dynamics, the kind of mid-tier tech firm that promises innovation in its glossy brochures but runs on stale coffee, fluorescent lighting, and quiet desperation. I started here as a junior analyst right out of grad school, wide-eyed and convinced I could change things from the inside. Now, at 28, I'm still wide-eyed, but mostly from sleepless nights spent perfecting reports no one reads, or so I thought. Until last Tuesday, I'd spent 6 months on Project Helios, a data-driven strategy to overhaul Viridian's failing sustainability division. Not just spreadsheets and bullet points, but real insight, predictive modeling, stakeholder interviews across 3 continents, even a prototype carbon tracking dashboard I coded myself during weekends. It wasn't just work. It was my voice, my future. And I'd finally scheduled the big presentation for the quarterly investor review, the one where Viridian's biggest backers would decide whether to double down or pull the plug. I walked into the boardroom that morning with my laptop, my notes, and a stupid, fluttering hope in my chest. The room was already half full. Suits, polished shoes, the usual corporate theater. But something felt off. At the head of the table sat my boss, Richard Thorne, slick silver hair, tailored navy blazer, the kind of man who says synergy with a straight face. And beside him, Leo. Leo was the new intern. 19, floppy-haired, always late, and somehow never reprimanded. He wore hoodies under his blazer like he was auditioning for a college brochure. Everyone assumed he was just another trust fund kid killing time before grad school. I'd even covered for him once when he forgot to file a client survey, because, honestly, he seemed harmless. Lost even. But today, Leo wasn't slouching. He was sitting ramrod straight, eyes locked on the screen at the front of the room. And on that screen, was my Helios presentation. My title slide. My logo. My everything. My stomach dropped like I'd missed a step in the dark. Richard cleared his throat, flashing that practiced, toothy smile. Good morning, everyone. Before we dive into the usual quarterly metrics, I'm thrilled to share a breakthrough initiative developed under my direct mentorship. Project Helios represents the future of Viridian's ESG commitments, and frankly, our entire market positioning. He clicked to the next slide. My slide. The one with the heat map visualization I'd stayed up until 3 a.m. debugging. My mouth went dry. My fingers dug into the leather strap of my bag. I wanted to stand up, to shout, "That's mine." But my legs wouldn't move. Because in that moment, I saw it, the subtle nod Richard gave Leo. Not a boss to an intern. A conspirator to an accomplice. The room murmured appreciatively. One of the investors, a woman with sharp cheekbones and a no-nonsense bun, leaned forward. Impressive. Who led the data architecture on this? Richard didn't miss a beat. Young Leo here was instrumental. Fresh perspective, relentless work ethic. Honestly, I've never seen someone so intuitive with complex systems. Leo ducked his head, playing modest. But his eyes flicked to me, just for a second, and there it was. Not guilt. Amusement. I sat through the rest of the presentation like a ghost. Every chart, every insight, every carefully worded recommendation, stolen. Polished just enough to sound like Richard's voice, but undeniably mine. When he finished, the investors clapped. One even stood. This is exactly the kind of bold thinking we've been waiting for, he said, extending a hand to Leo. Viridian's lucky to have you. Leo shook it. Just doing my part. I slipped out before the Q&A. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my coffee in the hallway. Back at my desk, a cramped corner cubicle with a dying succulent and a photo of my mom, I stared at my blank monitor. Rage burned behind my eyes, hot and clean. But beneath it, something colder, humiliation. I'd been played. Not just by Richard, by both of them. Because now it clicked. Leo wasn't just an intern. He was leverage. And I'd been too busy working to notice. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, mechanically answering emails, pretending my world hadn't just cracked open. At 6:47 p.m., as I packed up to leave, Richard appeared at my cubicle entrance. He leaned against the partition, arms crossed, all smug satisfaction. "Maya," he said, voice low and oily. "Great energy in there today. You seemed distracted." I kept my eyes on my bag. "Just tired, Richard. Helios took a lot out of me." He chuckled, like I'd made a joke. "Ah, yes. Helios. Quite the team effort, wasn't it? You know, leadership isn't just about doing the work. It's about knowing when to let others shine. Especially when it benefits the company." My head snapped up. "You stole it." His smile didn't waver. "I prefer curated and elevated. Let's be honest. Your version was solid, but it needed polish. Vision. And Leo, He's got connections. Big ones. His father's one of our largest private investors. You really think your little dashboard was going to impress Marcus Vale without his son's name attached? Marcus Vale. The name hit me like a bucket of ice water. Of course. The Vale Group. Billionaire venture capitalist. Philanthropist. The man who'd bailed Viridian out during the last market crash. And Leo was his son. I felt sick. So you used me. Both of you. Richard shrugged. Business, Maya. Not personal. Go. I'd advise you to let this go. Marcus doesn't take kindly to employees who cause waves. Especially not junior analysts. He let the last words hang, heavy with implication. Then he turned and walked away, whistling softly. I stood there long after he disappeared down the hall. The office was empty now, quiet except for the hum of servers in the basement. My reflection in the dark monitor looked pale, hollowed out. For a moment, I thought about quitting, packing my things, walking out, and never looking back. But then I remembered the 6 months. The all-nighters. The way my mom had hugged me when I told her about Helios. My girl's going to change the world, she'd said, her voice thick with pride. And Richard, smug, untouchable Richard, thinking he could erase me like a typo. No. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one. But not with shouting. Not with tears. With precision. The next morning, I arrived at 6 a.m., before security even finished their coffee. I bypassed my usual desk and went straight to the server room. Technically, I didn't have clearance, but I'd helped set up the backup protocols last year. I knew the weak points, knew where the logs were stored, and more importantly, I knew where Richard kept his personal cloud sync folder, the one he thought was encrypted. It took me 20 minutes to crack it. Turns out, his password was Synergy 2025. Some people never change. Inside, I found it, the original Helios draft I'd emailed him 6 weeks ago for feedback. Time-stamped. Metadata intact. And right beside it, a folder labeled Leo_Vale_onboarding. Curious, I clicked. What I saw made my blood run cold. Not just emails, contracts. A signed agreement between Richard and Marcus Vale, dated 3 months ago. Leo wasn't just an intern. He was a plant, part of a leadership immersion program designed to evaluate Viridian's internal talent and identify strategic vulnerabilities. In other words, they've been spying on us. On me. And there, in a subfolder titled Helios_appropriation_plan, was a detailed outline. How to reframe my work as Leo's, how to position Richard as the visionary mentor, even talking points for managing Maya's potential objections. They hadn't just stolen my report. They'd planned it like a heist. I copied everything. Every file. Every email. Every damning line of text. Then I wiped my tracks and slipped back to my desk just as the first employees trickled in. All day I watched Leo. He strutted through the office like he owned it, high-fiving colleagues, laughing too loudly in the break room. Richard kept shooting him proud, proprietary glances, like he'd finally found his golden ticket. But I saw the truth. Leo wasn't confident. He was nervous. Jumpy. He kept checking his phone, his eyes darting to the elevators like he expected someone. That afternoon, I did something reckless. I waited until Leo was alone in the supply closet, retrieving printer toner of all things, and stepped inside behind him, closing the door softly. He spun around, eyes wide. Jesus, Maya. You scared me. Did I? I kept my voice low, calm. Or is it Marcus? His face went slack. What? Your dad, I said. Marcus Vale. He knows you're using stolen work to impress him, right? Or did Richard forget to mention that part of the plan? Leo's bravado crumbled. He looked like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. I didn't steal anything. Richard said it was a team project. He said you were okay with it. Liar. The word came out colder than I intended. You knew. You've known since day one. You watched me work. You asked me questions about the dashboard. You even borrowed my notes last month, remember? For reference, you said. He swallowed hard. Look, Maya, I didn't want this. Dad wanted me to earn my place, so he set this whole thing up. Richard promised me I'd get credit if I played along. I didn't think you'd care this much. Care. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. This was my career, Leo. My name. And you treated it like a game. He looked down, shamefaced. For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then he muttered, You can't prove anything. I leaned in, close enough to see the panic in his eyes. Can I? I didn't wait for his reply. I walked out, leaving him standing there in the dim light, surrounded by boxes of paper clips and toner cartridges. That night, I didn't go home. I went to a 24-hour diner 3 blocks from the office, ordered black coffee, and opened my laptop. I started drafting an email. Not to HR, that would be useless. Not to Richard, that would be suicide. No, I was going straight to the top. To Marcus Vale. But I wouldn't just send files. I'd tell a story. My story. The truth about Project Helios. About Richard's manipulation. About Leo's complicity. And about Viridian's culture of theft disguised as collaboration. I wrote for hours. Rewrote. Edited. Made sure every fact was airtight. Every emotion controlled but undeniable. Then I attached the evidence. Carefully redacted to protect myself. And hit send just as the sun began to rise. As I walked home through the empty streets, exhaustion weighed on me like a second skin. But beneath it, something new resolve. Sharp. Clear. I didn't know what would happen next. Marcus might ignore me. He might side with his son. Richard could fire me before lunch. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. Because I'd stopped being the victim. I'd become the witness. And witnesses, they have power. 2 days later, I walked into Viridian to find the office buzzing. Leo was gone, cleared out his desk overnight. Richard was holed up in his office, blinds drawn, phone ringing off the hook. Rumor had it Marcus Vale was flying in that afternoon for an emergency strategy session. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and began drafting a new project proposal. This one had my name on it, front and center. And this time, I wasn't sharing it with anyone. Not yet, because the game had changed. And I was just getting started. The air in Viridian Dynamics that Monday morning was thick with tension, like the whole building was holding its breath. No one talked above a whisper. The usual clatter of keyboards and ring of phones had been replaced by hushed glances and nervous sips of coffee. Leo hadn't shown up in 3 days. His desk sat empty, his hoodie still draped over the chair like a ghost had left in a hurry. I kept my head down, but I wasn't hiding. I was watching. At 10:17 a.m., the elevator doors slid open on the executive floor, and Marcus Vale stepped out. He wasn't what I expected. No flashy suit, no entourage. Just a man in his late 50s, salt and pepper hair neatly combed, wearing a charcoal overcoat and carrying a worn leather briefcase. He moved with quiet authority, eyes scanning the room like he could see through walls. And then, his gaze landed on me. I didn't flinch. I met his stare evenly, heart hammering but posture steady. He walked straight to my cubicle. People froze mid-step. Even Richard's office door cracked open a sliver. Maya Lin. His voice was calm, deeper than I imagined. Human. Yes, sir. He didn't smile, didn't frown, just studied me for a long moment, like he was weighing my soul. Then he said, "My office." Now. I followed him to the top-floor conference room, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Inside, the table was empty except for 2 folders. One bore my name. The other, Richard Thorne. Marcus closed the door. "Sit." I did. He opened my folder first. "You sent me an email," he began, not looking up. 23 pages. Attached evidence. Timestamps. Metadata. Even a voice memo you recorded during a casual hallway conversation with my son. He finally looked at me. That was bold. "I didn't have a choice," I said. "You were the only person who could see the whole picture." He nodded slowly. "And you didn't ask for money. Or a promotion. You just wanted the truth documented." "Why?" "Because if I'd asked for something, you'd assume I was lying to get it," I said. "I needed you to believe me for the right reasons." A flicker of something, respect, crossed his face. Then he opened Richard's folder. Thorne's been with Viridian 12 years. Built half this company's client base. And yet, he tapped a printed email. He's been quietly siphoning credit from junior staff for years. "You weren't the first. But you're the first who fought back." I swallowed. "What happens now?" Marcus leaned back. "Richard's being escorted out as we speak. HR's drafting his termination letter. As for Leo," he sighed, the first crack in his composure. "He's grounded, indefinitely, and enrolled in ethics training, real training, not some corporate seminar. He'll be working at a food bank this summer. No exceptions." I didn't gloat. I just nodded. "He's young. He can learn." "That's generous of you," Marcus said. "Most people would want blood." "I want change," I corrected gently. "Not revenge." He studied me again, longer this time. Then he slid a document across the table. "I've reviewed Project Helios in its original form, the version you created. It's exceptional. More than that, it's necessary. Viridian's sustainability division is a mess. We've been greenwashing for years. Your plan, it's honest. Practical. Brave." My throat tightened. "Thank you. I'm reinstating it," he said. "With your name attached. Not as a team effort, Not as an intern's pet project. As Maya Lin's initiative. And I want you to lead it. I blinked. Me? But I'm just a junior analyst. You're the architect, he said firmly. And architects don't stay in cubicles. Before I could respond, he added, there's one condition. Of course. You report directly to me. Not to middle management. Not to some committee. To me. Because I don't trust this company's leadership. Not yet. But I trust you. Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them back. This wasn't about emotion. It was about opportunity. Responsibility. I accept, I said. He stood, extending his hand. Welcome to the real Viridian, Maya. 6 months later, Project Helios launched publicly. Not as a press release, but as a living, breathing transformation. We cut carbon emissions by 38% in our first quarter. Partnered with indigenous communities to source ethical materials. Published transparent impact reports. Warts and all. I moved out of my cubicle. Got an office with a window. Hired a small team of passionate, overlooked talent, people like me who've been grinding in silence. I made sure every idea was credited, every voice heard. Leo reached out 3 months in. Not with an apology, those are cheap, but with action. He'd started a nonprofit that helped tech interns understand their rights and intellectual ownership. He asked if I'd speak at their first workshop. I said yes. Richard, I heard he tried to pitch Helios to another firm under a new name. It didn't work. The industry talks. Reputation, once shattered, doesn't glue back together easily. As for me, I still work late some nights. Still drink too much coffee. But now, when I walk into the office, people don't just see the analyst. They see the woman who stood up when it mattered. Who chose truth over comfort, integrity over silence. And sometimes, when I pass the old boardroom where it all began, I pause. Not out of bitterness. Out of gratitude. Because that moment, the theft, the betrayal, the quiet fury in a fluorescent-lit hallway, didn't break me. It revealed me. And in the end, that was the most valuable thing anyone could have stolen and the one thing they could never take.